When my dad was critically ill, my husband was absent because of his ex-girlfriend. Now I'm thriving in my career while he tries to win me back. I said, no way.
Welcome to listen to my full sweet love series novel. I'm the blogger and I'm Twilight's novel. Now let's start the main story.
My father suddenly fell seriously ill and was directly rushed into the ICU. Before being taken into the ICU, he tightly grasped my hand. His eyes were filled with worry as he repeatedly told me to live a good life with Eric. I tried my best to hold back my tears and forced a smile, telling him not to worry. After that, I stayed alone outside the ICU, nervously making call after call to Eric. I waited until early morning, and finally, the phone was answered. However, it was Lily's voice that came from the other end of the line. Eric is busy. He left his phone with me. You can just tell me if you have anything, Lily said. I was silent for a moment. A wave of bitterness welled up in my heart, and I replied coldly. It's nothing major. I'm just thinking about getting a divorce. Unfortunately, my father didn't make it in the end. Next, there were many things to do, such as transferring my father's body from the hospital to the funeral home, notifying relatives, the unit, and my father's friends and students. Handling the aftermath wasn't as difficult as I had imagined. There were clear procedures and requirements for each step. I was like a puppet, numbly going through all the steps according to the process. 1. My condolences, text message after another, and words of comfort made my heart more and more numb. Those present who knew Eric were talking about his absence. From a professional perspective, Eric was my father's favorite student. He should have come to help at a time like this. From a personal relationship perspective, Eric was the son-in-law and should have come to fulfill his filial duties. But Eric never showed up from beginning to end. When I was scrolling through my WeChat moments, I saw that Eric was still attending an academic conference abroad. At the conference, he was full of confidence, and indeed, he had every reason to be proud. He was a young associate professor at a top-tier university in China, with several national-funded projects in his hands. I had informed Eric of my father's ICU admission and subsequent death almost immediately via WeChat and text messages. But he seemed to have disappeared. There was no response at all. I could only keep comforting myself, thinking that maybe he didn't have a signal abroad and couldn't receive the messages, or perhaps he hadn't seen them yet due to the time difference. It wasn't until one day when I saw Eric liking and commenting on Lily's moments that I finally woke up and could no longer deceive myself. I looked up at the photo of my father hanging on the wall and deeply realized that in this world, there would no longer be someone like my father who loved me selflessly. I still remember that the first time I saw Eric when I was young, I fell in love with him at first sight. After that, I secretly liked him for 5 years and then actively pursued him for 3 years. Finally, the two of us got married. For a long time, chasing after Eric had become a habit for me. 3 years ago, when I finally married Eric as I had wished, I was full of joy, thinking that I had finally become the most important person in his heart. On our wedding day, Eric said to me, "Thank you for always staying by my side silently." I remembered these words firmly. So after getting married, just like during our dating days, I never bothered Eric and just silently accompanied him. My father was a professor at Jiang University and also the vice dean of the college. To avoid others saying that he was climbing the social ladder, I never showed up in front of his colleagues. Eric was very busy with work, so I would patiently wait for him to come home every day, making sure he could have a hot meal and relax as soon as he entered the house. I knew that Lily had returned to China and that Eric and Lily were working on the same project. But I chose to believe Eric because he had sworn to be good to me for a lifetime. However, long-term one-sided efforts and companionship can really make a person feel tired. Now, I don't know if I still have the strength to keep chasing after Eric. Help me check this divorce agreement. Is there anything wrong with it? I handed the printed divorce agreement to my good friend, Emily. Emily is a lawyer. Before, we joked that if I ever got divorced, I would definitely ask her for help. Unexpectedly, it has come true now. This wasn't the first time I had seen a divorce agreement. Before, I had seen a similar document in Eric's study. At that time, Eric and I had a big fight over it and argued for several days. Eric explained that it was his colleague's divorce agreement and that he was just helping to take a look. I made Eric promise that I would never see a divorce-related document again in my life. But I never expected that this time, the divorce agreement was written by myself, and after careful consideration, I had truly decided to get a divorce. Don't worry at all. I'll definitely make him leave the marriage with nothing," Emily said energetically as she took the divorce agreement. Indeed, now that my father was gone, I couldn't be as naive as before. I had to plan for my future. I went back to my father's house to pack my things. There weren't many daily necessities, and I quickly sorted them out. But my father's entire study full of materials gave me a headache. My father's illness had come so suddenly that he hadn't had time to hand over many of his horizontal projects. I then realized that I had hardly added any of my father's students on WeChat. All along, it had been Eric who was in charge of contacting these students. Eric was my father's favorite student. After graduating with a PhD, he also stayed to work at Jiang University. My father had provided Eric with a lot of project resources, so Eric, at a young age, had better projects than many senior professors. The academic conference Eric was currently attending even had my father's name on it. Now, for the project handover, the most suitable person was still Eric. After much consideration, I decided to call Eric. But when I called, no one answered. I made 7 or 8 calls and finally had to give up helplessly. "The number you dialed is busy. Please try again later." I was all too familiar with this prompt tone. Before, I would get angry when I couldn't get through to him, but now, I just felt extremely tired. I had no choice but to ask one of my father's colleagues to come and collect these materials. From my father's colleague, I learned that the project Eric had gone abroad to participate in was a collaboration with the neighboring Normal University. And the project leader from the neighboring Normal University was Lily. She had also gone abroad for the conference. I was stunned for a moment and immediately understood everything. No wonder it was Lily who had answered my call before. Her voice had been full of arrogance then. "Eric is busy. His phone is with me. You can tell me if you have anything. My father is in the ICU. Please tell Eric and ask him to come back quickly," I said anxiously. "Got it." "He's about to go up and give a speech," Lily interrupted me impatiently. "Do you have anything else?" Lily's tone got worse. "Nothing much. Just a divorce. We'll talk about it when he comes back," I said disappointedly and hung up the phone. It was a week later when I saw Eric again. At the school, I was coming out of the dean's office when I ran into Eric head-on. It turned out that the dean had specifically called me over. The dean told me that according to the school's policy, if I wanted to, I could work at the school. The dean smiled and told me to go home and think it over carefully. He even personally sent me to the door. Right at the door, I saw Eric. "Why are you here?" Eric asked. "Hello, Dean," Eric greeted the dean directly, bypassing me. "Eric, if I'm not mistaken, you two are husband and wife. When you go back, help your wife consider the job position," the dean said. Eric nodded and followed the dean into the office. I politely said goodbye to the dean and tried to avoid Eric's gaze. Unexpectedly, Eric suddenly called out to me, "Wait for me. Let's go back together." I was stunned. It had only been a week since we last saw each other, but it felt like a long time had passed. Eric was still the same. Even his tone of voice hadn't changed. Obviously, it was a caring sentence, but it made me feel extremely cold. "Okay," I agreed. I didn't want to embarrass Eric in front of the dean, and I also needed to find a chance to talk to Eric about the divorce clearly. I waited for Eric in the office for half an hour. I was getting impatient. I told Eric that I would take a taxi back. But unexpectedly, it started to rain heavily outside. I stood at the door, hesitating whether to go back or not. At this time, Eric and the dean came over. "Lynn, you're waiting for Eric to go home together, right? His group is having a dinner gathering tonight. Do you mind if I join?" the dean asked. I shook my head. Anyway, I wasn't going, so there was nothing to mind. Eric sent the dean to his car and then trotted back to me. "Lynn, I was too busy just now and didn't have time to reply to your message." "I'm sorry," Eric explained. "The dean will be at the gathering later." "It won't be good if you don't go," Eric added. I knew that Eric wanted me to go to the gathering because he was worried about the dean's impression of him. Looking at Eric bowing his head and anxiously explaining, I felt helpless. I didn't want to care about these things anymore. "Okay, I'll go," I compromised again. I just hoped that we could part amicably and not cause trouble for Eric's work. When I got in the car, I saw that Lily was sitting in the passenger seat. Eric quickly turned his head to explain, Lily has helped me a lot with a recent project, so she's here today. Seeing me standing next to the car, Eric looked obviously embarrassed. Lily, why don't you sit in the back? Eric said. Sister-in-law, I'm sorry. I'm used to sitting here. I'll get out and switch with you, Lily said, but she didn't show any sign of getting up to switch seats. I didn't want to watch them bicker anymore, so I directly sat in the back seat. I shook my head and reminded Eric, if we don't leave now, we won't be able to catch up with the dean's car. Something similar had happened before. That time, I insisted on sitting in the passenger seat. When we got home, Eric scolded me, saying that I didn't know the occasion and that it was just a matter of a seat, not worth arguing about. Now it seemed that it really wasn't worth getting angry about such things. I sat quietly in the back seat, looking at the heavy rain outside the window, and thinking about whether to work at Jiang University. The dean said that I could choose between an administrative position and a teaching position, but he recommended the administrative position, saying that the assessment requirements for the teaching position were higher. I understood the dean's hidden meaning. The administrative position might be relatively easier to get, while the teaching position required real talent and learning. Regarding the job at the school, if I asked Eric, I would definitely get more professional advice. But looking at Eric and Lily sitting in the front, I didn't even have the desire to open my mouth. Lily in the front kept trying to start conversations, but this time, Eric was acting unusually. He didn't pay much attention to her and kept looking at me through the rear-view mirror, trying to bring me into the conversation. Unfortunately, this time, I didn't want to pay attention to Eric at all. Eric was really good looking. He had a small head and broad shoulders, and he looked fresh and youthful. When he wore casual clothes, he looked like a college student. Today, he was wearing casual clothes, and as soon as he got out of the car, he was surrounded by students. I followed behind them, watching them chatting lively. I didn't know when it started, but following behind Eric had become my habit. But now, the person standing next to Eric had become Lily. Just like at this moment, they were sitting side by side naturally. There were limited seats reserved, and I became the extra person. Everyone had taken their seats one after another, but I was still standing there, looking extremely awkward. Teacher Eric, is this your newly recruited student? Are we going to have a new junior sister in our academic family? One of Eric's students reacted first and quickly added a seat for me. I finally sat down. This is your teacher's wife, Eric's wife. You kid. The dean's words made everyone at the table fall silent. At this time a girl whispered, I thought teacher Lily was. When there was only one room left in the hotel, they two lived together. Because it was so quiet at the scene, many people heard what the girl said, including me. Eric was sitting right across from me. His face was full of panic and nervousness. He was probably afraid that I would make a scene on the spot. If it were before, I might really have made a big fuss. But now, I didn't care anymore. I just lowered my head to eat and pretended not to hear anything. It was the hotel's arrangement that there was one less room. So I helped teacher Lily settle down first. Eric looked at me and hurriedly explained. Then I went to stay somewhere else, Eric added. I smiled indifferently, turned the lazy Susan, and continued eating as if they weren't talking about me. Teacher Lily wasn't familiar with the place, so I accompanied her to the hotel, Eric kept explaining, and everyone present felt embarrassed for him. Lynn, did you hear me? Eric looked at me and asked. I know you're angry, but... Eric wanted to continue. Before he could finish, I replied, I'm not angry. I understand. It's normal for you to help when she's in a strange place. I even helped Eric explain. Aren't you going to ask anything? Eric asked stubbornly. Did he really want me to get angry? I shook my head. I didn't understand why Eric was so fixated on this kind of situation. Let's eat. Finally, the dean stepped in to smooth things over. Everyone quickly changed the topic and talked about work matters that I didn't understand. I just sat there quietly, eating. Lily across the table kept picking up food for Eric, but Eric didn't seem to have much of an appetite and hardly ate anything. I thought this dinner gathering would end peacefully, but unexpectedly, the dean suddenly mentioned my father. Lynn, it's such a pity about your father. Don't blame me for being nosy, but Eric should have come back even if he was abroad at that time, the dean said. I nodded as a response. It had been a long time since my father left, and I had gradually gotten used to the pain. Just like peeling an onion, I buried my inner pain little by little. Dean, what happened to Lynn's father? Eric stopped with his chopsticks in mid-air. Eric's question made the scene quiet again. Didn't you know? Lynn's father had a sudden cerebral infarction and couldn't be saved, the dean said. With a snap, Eric's chopsticks fell to the ground. I didn't know. Why didn't anyone tell me? Lynn, why didn't you tell me about such a big thing? Eric stood up and loudly questioned me in front of everyone. I'm also very surprised that you don't know, I replied coldly. Lily next to him stood up nervously, trying to pull Eric back, but was accidentally pulled down by Eric. Lily fell heavily to the ground and cried out in pain. But this time, Eric didn't care about Lily at all. Instead, he grabbed my hand and rushed out, slamming the door behind him. I was dragged by Eric, staggering all the way. I struggled but couldn't break free. Let go of me. I finally shook off Eric's hand. My wrist was already red from being grabbed. Lynn, why didn't you tell me? Teacher passed away, such a huge thing. How could you not inform me? He was my teacher. Eric asked me desperately at the end of the hotel corridor. This was the first time I saw Eric so out of control, but I didn't feel a bit of pity in my heart. I only knew that I had done everything I should. Eric slumped down, squatting on the ground, looking up at me. Why didn't you tell me? He kept repeating this sentence. I wiped away the tears that I couldn't hold back any longer, and looked at Eric with a calm gaze. I called you at that time, but no one answered. In the end, Lily answered the phone. I said. She said you were about to go up and give a speech, that you were very busy. I added. Eric looked at me in disbelief, then took out his phone and rummaged through the call records in a flurry. Finally, he stopped at the page from a week ago. He finally saw those dozens of missed calls. I sent you text messages and WeChat messages. I even posted the information about my father's funeral on my Moments. I said, if you had cared about me at all, you would have seen these messages. You saw those dozens of missed calls. As long as you had called me back once, you would have known about my father. After saying this, I leaned weakly against the wall. Eric's questioning was like a knife, reopening the scar in my heart, making me feel as if I was back in that helpless moment when I couldn't reach him. I thought you were angry, Eric explained. Because Lily told me that you kept calling when you couldn't reach me, and I thought you were being jealous and acting up. Well, indeed, I would get into a tiff with Eric because of Lily. Once before, I went to Eric's office to look for him. Since I didn't know the office password, I could only wait outside. Unexpectedly, I met Lily head-on. Lily sized me up, then skillfully entered the password and walked into the office with ease. She even pretended to be nice and poured me a glass of water. Eric and I have quite a few cooperation projects. Don't mind it, Lily said. I opened my mouth but didn't know how to respond. After waiting for a long time without seeing Eric, when I wanted to leave, Lily deliberately blocked the door and wouldn't let me go. Lily also taunted me. Sister-in-law, no wonder Eric doesn't pay much attention to you. After all, you got your degree abroad. You don't have much in common with us. I immediately understood what Lily meant. She was clearly saying that I was not good enough and that Eric looked down on me. At that time, I was angry and anxious, but my rationality told me not to argue with Lily. Get out of the way. I'm leaving, I said. What if I don't? Lily continued to make things difficult for me. I directly pushed Lily's hand away and walked out. And this scene happened to be seen by Eric. Eric frowned and trotted over, pushing me aside and quickly helping Lily up. With the little strength I used, there was no way I could have made Lily fall. Even if she lost her balance, she could have leaned against the wall. Lynn, if you have a problem with me, come at me. Don't target Lily. She's here to help, Eric said. Eric, sister-in-law didn't mean it. She was just in a hurry to leave, Lily said while looking at me provocatively, and she pressed herself closely against Eric. So, do you want me to apologize to her? I looked at Lily coldly. Eric helped Lily to the sofa and stood in front of her, as if afraid that I would do something again. Lynn, don't you think you should apologize? Where's your manners? Eric questioned me. Yeah, in Eric's eyes, I seemed to have become a person without manners. I hated seeing Eric and Lily going in and out of various conferences together. I was jealous that Eric and Lily always had so much to talk about every day. I couldn't help but look at Lily's moments, checking the updates of her and Eric participating in various activities. But no matter how uncomfortable I felt, as long as Eric came back and explained to me that they were just working together, I would always choose to believe him. But this time, I was really tired. Even if I wanted to make a fuss, I didn't have the strength. Because of my father's departure, I found that I wasn't as strong as I thought. I'm leaving. The divorce agreement is in your study. Let me know after you sign it. After saying that, I went back to the private room to get my things and left without looking back. Lily actually chased after me and reached out to grab me. I'm sorry. Eric interrupted me before I could finish speaking. Lily said. Let go, I said, my eyes red. I wiped hard at the place where Lily had touched me. It was still raining heavily outside. I hailed a taxi at random. Eric also chased out and slapped the window of the taxi, shouting something. But in the heavy rain, I couldn't hear what he was saying at all. The driver turned around and looked at me. I told the driver to drive quickly. The driver stepped on the gas, and the car drove away. In the car, my phone kept ringing. Looking at the increasing number of missed calls and the 99+ messages on WeChat, I only felt extremely tired. I'll go back to pack my luggage tonight. I sent a message to Eric. Eric immediately started sending 60-second voice messages. Stop sending. I got it. I replied. This was also a sentence Eric often said to me before. I knew better than anyone how hurtful this sentence was. On WeChat, the other party is typing. Flashed several times. Finally, Eric replied with a, okay. When we first got married, I shared almost everything with Eric. When an aunt at the market praised me for being beautiful while I was buying groceries, I would happily tell Eric. When our kitten at home was being affectionate with me, I would take a video and send it to Eric. When the sun came out and I took out all the bed sheets at home to wash and dry, I would also take a photo and show it to Eric. At first, I thought it was a bit too clingy, but Eric said he liked seeing me share these things, saying that it allowed him to find the fun of life in his busy work. I also knew that Eric was busy, so I didn't expect him to reply immediately. As long as he sent a meme to respond after seeing the message, I would be very happy. But later, when I got used to sharing my life, Eric started to find me annoying. From enthusiastic responses at the beginning to gradually no replies. And then came that cold, stop sending. I got it. All my desire to share disappeared in an instant. So now, in my chat history with Eric, it was just me asking Eric if he was coming home, and Eric simply replying with a yes or no. Little girl, did you have a fight with your boyfriend? My daughter is about your age, the driver said, starting a conversation with me. If my daughter was made this upset, I'd definitely teach that brat a good lesson, the driver said, looking indignant on my behalf. Looking at the driver, I thought of my father. Even on his deathbed, my father had told me to live a good life with Eric. My father must have been very satisfied with Eric to entrust me to him for a lifetime. But now, I didn't want to hold on to this relationship anymore. I wanted to give up. In fact, I had known Eric for a long time. My father was a university professor, and my mother was a well-known painter. I always felt that I was a spoiled, little good-for-nothing. At that time, I was studying at the affiliated middle school of Jiang University. Besides students like me who got in through connections, the other students at Jiang University affiliated middle school were all top-notch students. Eric and Lily were the best among them. Eric ranked first in the comprehensive science exam, and Lily ranked first in the comprehensive liberal arts exam. And me? My grades were always at the bottom of the class. At that time, my idea was simple. I just wanted to get through high school and then ask my father to send me abroad. Without much academic pressure, I just knew how to have fun every day. Until one day, I went too far and was cornered in an alley by a group of real hooligans. Eric must have passed by at that time and saw me. I thought that a good student like Eric definitely wouldn't meddle in my business. But in that urgent situation, I could only give it a shot. I asked Eric for help, hoping he could find a teacher or someone else to save me. Unexpectedly, Eric, who looked gentle and weak, directly smashed a wine bottle by the roadside and rushed in front of me without hesitation. Eric's actions scared away the hooligans, and they also made me cry. Eric immediately came over to check if I was hurt. In fact, his own hands were shaking like a leaf. Thank you. My name is... I said. I know you, Lynn. Your teacher Lynn's daughter, the last ranked student in the school, Eric said. To my surprise, Eric actually knew me, although this impression didn't seem very good. That was when I started to pay attention to Eric silently. But Eric only had studies on his mind and didn't notice me at all. I didn't bother him either. After all, a cold and aloof top student like him wasn't someone I, a little troublemaker, could mess with. I silently paid attention to Eric for 3 years like this. After graduating from high school, I went abroad smoothly. My father helped me apply to a good school. When I was abroad, I heard from a friend that Eric and Lily had both been admitted to Zhejiang University, and the science genius and the liberal arts top student couple were together. I thought that maybe it was time for me to end my years of secret love and completely let go of Eric. But unexpectedly, news of their breakup came soon after. What was even more unexpected was that after returning to China, I met Eric directly in my father's office. It turned out that Eric was the favorite student my father had always wanted to introduce to me. "Long time no see," Eric said. "So it's you." Eric and I looked at each other and smiled. Because of my father, everything that followed seemed to go smoothly. Every time I went to the laboratory to find my father, I would deliberately or not look for Eric and chat with him. Every time Eric worked overtime in the laboratory on weekends, I would bring him delicious food. Every time Eric was in a bad mood, I would accompany him for a walk on campus and listen to him pour out his feelings. In order to spend more time with Eric, I even moved into the faculty dormitory that my father no longer lived in. During that period, we tacitly avoided the topic of Lily. I also heard some things about their breakup. It was said that when they graduated from university, Lily broke up with Eric suddenly for some reason, and then went abroad with her new boyfriend, while Eric chose to stay at Zhejiang University. Their relationship ended like that. After that, I always stayed by Eric's side and bravely pursued him. After 3 years of pursuit, when Eric graduated with a PhD, we finally got married. I thought that I could follow Eric like this and live a happy life forever. But unexpectedly, Lily appeared again. Eric and Lily met again because of an inter-school fellowship event. I knew about this fellowship event that day. Although I couldn't go myself, I still went to pick up Eric. I had my own little plan. I wanted to declare my sovereignty openly and tell others that Eric was already taken. But when I saw Eric and Lily walking out of the fellowship event, chatting and laughing happily, I immediately felt a strong sense of crisis. Over the years, there were people who showed interest in Eric, but I never worried. From our childhood acquaintance until now, I always thought that no one could replace me in Eric's heart. But Lily was different. Their breakup had been so sudden. Maybe they still had feelings for each other. Such obsession and memories would only grow deeper with time. I went home and found that Eric had already come back. Eric was completely soaked by the rain and was sitting dejectedly in the study, looking at the divorce agreement. I casually picked up a towel and threw it to Eric. "Dry yourself. If there's no problem with the agreement, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to register for divorce as soon as possible," I said. "Are you leaving tonight?" Eric asked. I had been packing my things these days, planning to leave this home in a few days. I didn't expect Eric to come back today. "Yeah," I replied simply. I went back to my room and pulled out the suitcase. It was almost full. "Lynn, I know I was wrong," Eric said. It was another such insincere apology. I was already tired of hearing them. I went back to the study and looked at the wet Eric. His image somehow overlapped with the boy who had saved me in the alley back then. The person I loved had always been the one who could risk everything for me. But the Eric in front of me didn't seem to be that person anymore. "Tell me, what exactly did you do wrong?" I leaned against the wall weakly and asked. I didn't want to forgive Eric. I just wanted to see how much sincerity Eric still had for me. When Eric heard this, his eyes lit up obviously. Before, every time we had a fight, after Eric explained, I would forgive him. "I promise I'll have less contact with Lily in the future. She went too far this time. I'll make her apologize to you," Eric said. "I'll definitely come home right after work from now on and accompany you on weekends. You've always said you wanted to go to the beach. Let's go this weekend." Eric said a lot. It seemed that Eric knew very well that he had been getting too close to Lily, and he also knew that coming home early to accompany me would make me happy. He even knew that I had always wanted to go to the beach. He knew everything, but he just hadn't been willing to do it before. "So you knew all along," I said. Eric was stunned. Smart as he was, he understood the meaning behind my words. This time, a simple apology wouldn't solve the problem. "It's raining so hard tonight. Leave tomorrow," Eric said. He directly grabbed my suitcase and then locked himself and the suitcase in the bedroom. I was caught off guard. What was Eric doing? Acting like a child? Snatching things? Even if I stayed tonight, what was the point? I never expected that Eric, who was always so aloof and rational, would act so unreasonably with me. I kicked the door and called out, but no matter what I did, Eric wouldn't open the door. I was both angry and amused. I had no choice but to stay and sleep in the guest room. Before going to bed, I saw a message from Eric. It was the record of him checking into a hotel abroad that day, and screenshots of their usual chat records. There were a lot of screenshots. I was too sleepy to look at more after just a few. Most of Eric's replies were indeed related to work, but Lily was different. Lily mixed a lot of her personal life into the work-related topics. She always used a coquettish tone, sent cute emojis, and shared everything in detail. Eric probably wanted to prove that he hadn't done anything to betray me. But he didn't know that the fact that he could chat with Lily so much had already hurt me. It was a kind of betrayal. I replied with the sentence Eric often said to me before, "Stop sending." I got it. The next day, I was woken up by the alarm of the soybean milk machine. I rushed to the kitchen and turned off the soybean milk machine that was overflowing with foam all over the floor. Next to it stood Eric, who was in a panic, trying to scoop out the burnt black eggs. Eric was really excellent in study and work, but in life, he was a complete mess. "Lynn, why did you wake up so early? I made you breakfast." "Wait a minute," Eric said. "No, I'm not eating," I replied coldly. "I took a day off today. Let's go visit teacher together," Eric said. "Then we can go to that restaurant you've always wanted to go to, and tonight we can." Eric was arranging today's plan on his own. The cemetery was in the suburbs, very far away. I didn't want to go there with Eric. I didn't want to recall the pain of sending my father away alone. No, I refused. "Lynn, if you don't like the breakfast I made, we can go out to eat." Then, Eric kept talking. I looked at Eric, my eyes full of annoyance. "Eric, can't you understand what I'm saying? If you want to visit my father, go by yourself," I said. Eric stopped what he was doing. "Lynn, you must know that if I don't agree, you can't get a divorce." Eric actually threatened me with divorce. "Can you be reasonable?" I said angrily. "No. Lynn, I just don't want to be reasonable. What can you do about it?" Eric was being unreasonable. Eric once again surprised me with his behavior. Sitting in Eric's car, I felt a bit carsick. I didn't really like things with a strong perfume smell, but Eric had a very strong smelling air freshener in his car. On that petal-shaped air freshener, there was a small sign that said, "Lily's Gardenia, scented gift." Eric hurriedly took down that air freshener, but the smell still lingered. After driving for an hour, we finally arrived at the cemetery. Eric took out a bunch of flowers from the back seat of the car. I had planned to let Eric visit my father alone, but Eric insisted on dragging me in with him. "Eric, stop making trouble. Let's go separately," I said. Eric didn't come to the funeral before, and I didn't need his company this time. "Lynn, we're still not divorced yet." Eric used the divorce as an excuse again. "Besides, teacher also hoped to see us getting along well, right?" Eric said. My father had always been very satisfied with Eric. When we got married, my father said that he was very relieved to entrust me to Eric for a lifetime. My father also said that he couldn't accompany me for a lifetime, but Eric could. But now it seemed that my father was wrong. There's no one in this world who can truly be relied on for a lifetime. I waited aside as Eric knelt in front of my father's grave for a long time. Eric even promised my father's tombstone that he would treat me well in the future. I believed that Eric was sincere at this moment. But what did sincerity matter? In the face of reality, it was often vulnerable. Just like now, Eric's phone had rung 3 times. I glanced at it and saw that it was Lily calling. Eric also looked at me. "Sorry, it might be work." Eric said. "It's okay," I said. The phone rang again, and I directly helped Eric answer it. Finally got through. "Eric, I took the students out for a field trip, but we got lost in the mountains," Lily's voice came through. The signal here is bad, and I didn't dare to call anyone else. Can you come and save me? Lily sounded very panicked. Eric asked for the address and the number of students, then looked at me hesitantly. Go ahead, go and save her, I said before Eric could speak. I understand. It's your responsibility, I added. Eric hung up the phone. Then I'll take you back first, Eric said. No need. Aren't they in two different directions? You go. I'll be fine, I said. I wasn't being brave. After going through so much, this was really nothing to me. After Eric left, in front of my father's grave, I told him about my decision to divorce Eric. A gentle breeze blew, sweeping away the nearby leaves, and it seemed to also sweep away the last trace of hesitation in my heart. I always felt that my father was looking down on me from the sky and had agreed with my decision. I directly took a taxi to Jiang University. Dean, I choose the teaching position, I said to the dean. The dean looked a bit. He said that although I had a master's degree from abroad, it wasn't enough in Jiang University. However, the dean was very kind. He helped me contact the leaders of the Academy of Fine Arts and gave me a trial teaching opportunity. In fact, I wasn't as ignorant as Eric and Lily thought. When I was abroad, I studied fashion aesthetics and design. I completed all the undergraduate credits in just 2 years and then successfully applied for a master's degree. After that, I interned at a luxury brand abroad while working on my graduation project. At that time, a foreign professor highly appreciated me and warmly invited me to stay and join his team. However, when I came back to visit my father, I met Eric and gave up the opportunity abroad without hesitation. Looking back now, it would be a lie to say I didn't regret it. After all, that team was a top-notch design team. If I had stayed, I might have become a top-notch designer by now. Under the dean's surprised gaze, I also applied for the on-campus faculty dormitory. Aren't you and Eric buying a house next door? The dormitory conditions are much worse than at home. What's going on? The dean asked, looking puzzled. I just shook my head gently. I didn't plan to reveal the divorce, and the dean seemed to understand my meaning. He sighed and told me to prepare well for the position assessment. From then on, I directly moved into the school dormitory. Eric didn't stop me anymore. Instead, he started a crazy show-up mode, sending me all kinds of things every 2 or 3 days and sending me messages every day to report his whereabouts. I got out of class early today and went to the East Area cafeteria. I think you'll definitely like the fried rice there. I worked overtime today and bought you a cup of milk tea and brought it to your dormitory. It's your favorite flavor. I heard that your trial teaching assessment is a bit difficult. I contacted my former classmates. Maybe they can help. He messaged me more frequently than when I was chasing him before. But he didn't reply to any of my messages about divorce. He just pretended not to understand. Since I was busy preparing for the assessment, I temporarily put aside the matter of divorce. According to the normal assessment standards, it was almost impossible for me to stay at Jiang University. Fortunately, there was a rule in the assessment of the Academy of Fine Arts teachers that special recruitment was available based on competition awards. So recently, I've been fully focused on the design competition. While preparing for the competition, I also had to worry about the teaching trial. I was so busy that I had to stay up late every day. But this kind of busyness made me feel an unprecedented sense of fulfillment. After really getting into work, I found that I had been out of touch with society a lot before. What Eric said before was right. I used to stay at home all day, and I had fewer and fewer topics to talk about with him. When he complained about his hard work, I could only offer a few empty words of comfort and couldn't actually help. But Lily could discuss work plans with him, work on projects together, and share his pressure. No wonder we gradually lost our common language. Finally, on the night before the deadline, I submitted my competition entry. Whether I could stay at Jiang University depended entirely on the results of this competition. In the past month, I had been very tense. Now I could finally relax a little. I walked out of the dormitory and strolled slowly on the Jiang University playground. Since it was Friday night, the playground was bustling. Some people were running hard to exercise, some were setting up stalls at the flea market, shouting to sell things, and there were also clubs passionately performing dances. In the middle of the playground, someone was singing loudly. Time seemed to go back to the past. Everything on campus seemed to be the same as before. I casually posted a moment on WeChat, then sat on the lawn of the playground and put on my headphones to listen to music. Before, Eric and I also loved coming to the playground on Fridays. I would always pester him to buy me flowers and drag him to the middle of the playground to sing for him with the microphone. I was really bad at singing. Always off key. He would listen with a helpless but doting expression and finally pull me off the stage amidst everyone's jeers. Those scenes were so familiar. Looking at the 99+ messages on my phone, I suddenly realized that I hadn't replied to Eric's messages for a long time. It turned out that when you don't care about someone, you really subconsciously ignore the messages they send. No wonder he used to ignore my shares. Eric still reported his whereabouts to me every day without fail. I took a photo of the playground and sent it to him. "If you're free, come to the playground and find me." I thought it would take him a long time to reply, but as soon as I sent the message, he replied immediately. "Lynn, I'm here. Turn around." I turned around and looked for a long time before finally seeing him at the other end of the playground. I walked towards him. All the way, his eyes never left me. "Long time no see," I said indifferently. I really didn't want to exchange pleasantries with him, nor did I want to recall those past events. "You look really beautiful today," Eric said. I was stunned for a moment. I didn't expect him to say that at all. To prepare for the design draft, I hadn't washed my hair for several days and was wearing a hat to cover it up. I just randomly grabbed a t-shirt to put on. I looked a mess. Eric used to be a bit of a clean freak. He definitely wouldn't have liked me like this before, but now. Eric took out a bunch of flowers from behind him. It seemed that he had just bought them on the playground. There were only platycodons left. I picked for a long time. "I hope you'll like them," Eric said. I took the bunch of flowers. They were really beautiful, but I didn't like them anymore. Just like Eric. He was really good in many ways, but I didn't want him anymore. "Set a time. Let's go through the divorce formalities as soon as possible," I said directly. Eric still continued to play dumb. I really couldn't figure it out. Eric had always been a person who planned things well and was very rational. Why was he being so obtuse about the divorce? Eric asked me to wait for him for a while. I could probably guess what he was going to do. He was probably going to give me something and apologize again. After waiting for 10 minutes and he still didn't come back, I really didn't want to wait anymore. I had waited for him long enough over the years. I didn't want to stay there, waiting eagerly for his response. Just as I was packing up my things to leave, I heard someone calling my name from the playground. "Lynn, I agree. Let's get a divorce." I turned my head and saw that in the middle of the playground, Eric was holding a microphone and shouting at me. I was completely stunned. What on earth was Eric doing? There were a lot of college students around, and they started talking. I've seen proposals on the playground, but never a divorce announcement. I was so embarrassed that I wanted to find a hole to crawl into and leave this place immediately. Unexpectedly, Eric's student, the one from the dinner gathering last time, ran over and pulled me to the front of the crowd. I looked at Eric standing in the middle. He was waving at me. Now everyone's eyes were on me, and they all knew that I was the one getting a divorce. "I want to sing a song for her today," Eric said. Then he started singing. It was a song I used to like very much, but he sang completely out of tune. It was like ear-piercing noise. I could even hear people around secretly laughing at him, saying that they never expected the usually aloof teacher Eric to be so funny. Eric finished singing the song with many stumbles. The students around were cheering. I just looked at him quietly, thinking that when he was done making a scene, this farce would end. I never realized that life without her has become so boring. I also didn't know that every day when I go home and can only see her things but not her, I would feel so sad. I did a word frequency analysis of our 7-year chat records and found that she was always caring about me, but I rarely responded to her. I promised her father that I would take care of her for a lifetime, but I didn't keep my promise. I was wrong. I let her down. So Lynn, I agree to the divorce. But please give me another chance. After the divorce, let's start over, okay? People around were whispering, "Is this a divorce or a proposal?" Not only were they confused, but I was also completely lost. I never thought Eric would do something like this. Before, when we saw someone proposing on campus, he even criticized it, saying that it was just to attract attention and had no meaning at all. But actually, I had always secretly hoped that Eric could propose to me in front of everyone's blessings, but I never got to experience that. Even when we got married, it was me who brought up the idea first. I never expected that this long overdue sense of ceremony would appear when we were about to get a divorce. Eric walked down from the platform. He took off the ring I was wearing. Then, he took out another ring and knelt down on one knee. When the people around saw this scene, the cheering became even louder. Say yes. Say yes. Teacher Eric is so creative. Who wouldn't be touched by this? God, his wife is so lucky. Yeah, this scene was really surprising, but now besides surprise, I didn't feel anything else in my heart. I used to think that if Eric did this to me, I would be extremely happy, forgive him without hesitation, and immediately agree to his request. But at this moment, I hesitated. Compared to the surprise and romance in front of me, I was more afraid of going back to that painful life. Once back to our daily lives, I really didn't have the courage to go through all those bad things again. I didn't respond for a long time. Eric saw my hesitation and didn't force me. Eric put away both rings. Then, in full view of everyone, he picked me up in his arms. I didn't struggle. Instead, I buried my head in his chest. The tears that I had held back for a long time finally flowed out. All the grievances of these years were released in this instant. Amidst everyone's cheering, Eric carried me away from the playground. After walking out of the crowd, Eric put me down and blocked me against the wall, not letting me leave. Eric, have you had enough? I said, angry and anxious. Eric didn't answer me. He just stared at me intently. I turned my head away, not wanting to look at him, but he suddenly reached out, put his arm around my neck, and lowered his head to kiss me. This bastard. I was ashamed and angry. I instinctively tried to push him away, but he kissed me so forcefully that he hardly gave me any chance to breathe. I was so weak from his kiss that I could only lean against the wall. I don't know how long it took before he finally let me go. In all these years of marriage, this was the first time I saw him so out of control. Eric, what on earth do you want? I asked him angrily. Nothing. Just as I said, let's get a divorce, Eric said. He handed me the signed divorce agreement and then turned around and walked away alone. Looking at his departing back, I was even angrier. This guy was so unreasonable. Why didn't I notice what kind of person he was before? I scanned the divorce agreement into an electronic version and sent it to Emily. After reading it, Emily told me that Eric not only gave me the house but also transferred his car and other movable and immovable properties that could be transferred to my name. In Emily's words, he seemed to want to give me everything he had. Emily also gently advised me, saying that this man was actually quite sincere and that I should think it over again. She also said that she had seen so many men fight tooth and nail over a little property during divorce, and Eric was the first one she had seen who was so generous. I just smiled and told her that my mind was made up and I didn't want to consider it anymore. In the past month, I had been living a very comfortable life on my own. Once, I might have been an insignificant person in Eric's life. Now, Eric was no longer important to me either. After the divorce cooling-off period, my marriage with Eric finally came to a complete end. The results of the design competition I participated in were also announced. I won the second prize for emerging designers. Although it was only the second prize, because the competition was of a high level, I could temporarily stay at Zhejiang University. In the Academy of Fine Arts of Zhejiang University, I got along well with other teachers, and the students were all very interesting. When teaching them, I felt like I was getting younger. There were even students who would always joke with me after class, asking if Eric was still chasing me. Every time I heard that, I would just smile and not respond. It was strange. After the divorce, I saw Eric more frequently than before we got divorced. Many students and teachers in the school were gossiping about me and Eric. On the one hand, Eric was quite famous at Zhejiang University. After that big scene, almost everyone in the school knew that we were divorced and that Eric was trying hard to pursue me for a reunion. On the other hand, Eric always came to the Academy of Fine Arts to look for me. There were almost always flowers from him on my desk. Sometimes when I was teaching, I would turn my head and see him staring at me outside the classroom. On rainy days, he would be waiting outside with an umbrella. If it was before, these actions of his would definitely have moved me a lot. But now they were just a burden to me. During the time I worked in the Academy of Fine Arts, I learned a lot of new things and saw a broader world. I discovered more of my potential and also realized how stupid I was to give up my career for love. Now I'm living a very fulfilling life, doing the fashion design work I like, and I have a new goal: to continue pursuing a PhD. I contacted the professor from my study abroad days. When the professor learned that I wanted to go back to study, he was very happy and quickly sent me an offer. This time, it was Eric who was left behind, and I chose to move forward. The day before I left, I took the initiative to contact Eric. When he learned that I was going to study abroad, he opened his mouth as if he had a lot to say, but in the end, he just simply wished me all the best. I could tell that he was also slowly letting go of me. This was for the best. After all, we had loved each other once, and we didn't want to let down the fate of getting to know and understand each other. From then on, we each embarked on different life paths, hoping that we could both live well.